is the second phase. We did one last year, and this is a few of the other cemeteries and a few other things. And I decided I would look at different things. So I looked at unusual names. And we can say unusual name. People will think it's an unusual name, and someone will say, well, it isn't. Because my kids, one of them was called Hajar, and the other one's Tongan. And if you saw that written down, you'd say that was one of the unusual names. But to me, it's not an unusual name. So if I'm insulting your family by choosing an unusual name that's unusual to me and it's in your family, I apologize up front. But and then I decided I would find the first person that was buried in the cemetery. And this might not be completely accurate. It's going by the records. We were given records by each of the cemeteries. Jory and I actually went into the cemeteries too and took information off the stones and all. So we might have missed someone. So I find a lot of people that come already know a lot about the people that we're seeing, about the cemeteries, or have family in the cemeteries. So if you find something that we have wrong, or you have something you can add to it, please let us know, because it's growing all the time. In fact, just give us a call or come into the center sometime and we'll can add it to the record, things that you have, because it's the whole town, it's for the whole town. And it comes from the CPA project. This is the second one we're doing. We have people that live the longest. 103 is the longest I've found so far. And the black label is about an individual, because some of the individuals are rather interesting, and we thought we would just sort of talk about them. So now, if you can remember the colors, you'll know when the picture comes up. And I have to tell you, I did this, and I still have to go back and look at the colors each time. So it's not something that's easily remembered. Okay, if you remember, were any of you here for the first one that we did? It was a cemetery. It's just across the street, almost on Sandwich Road. In back, it's called the Blackwell Cemetery. And there was a cross in there, wooden cross, with the name Chili on it. And we could figure out everything else. No one knew what that was. So every time we went to do a thing, I said, does anyone know who Chili is? Or what it means? Someone finally found the answer for us. It was a dog. And it wasn't, this is a really old cemetery, but the dog was rather new. He was 20th century. So I'm really not sure what he looked like, but this is a dog. And so any of you want to know what that mystery was, we did solve the mystery. It took us a while to solve it, but it did happen. But when we talk about cemeteries, one of the things that we really have to do in the town of Bourne, there's not a soul that doesn't know Ned Nickerson, particularly involved with cemeteries. Although I do have to tell you, there was a question, I had a question about where he was buried, and I called the Nickerson funeral home, and I asked them, and they didn't even know who he was. Oh, that's because do you live in Bourne? Yes, I just moved here. Oh, you have an excuse.
That's because the Nickerson funeral home is bought up by a big conglomerate, and there's funeral homes all over the country. And they have no relation whatsoever to the people that founded it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, but that is the reason why they would. But you would think if it's in their name, they would want to know.
You would think so.
When they, when they called the archives and asked them a question. They had no idea. It wouldn't be that they didn't have the information, but they had no idea who he was even.
Yeah.
I was really surprised. But anyhow, the fact is, we do know who he is. And he came here, let's see, Edward Drew Nickerson. And he stepped off the train in the village of Buzzards Bay on one October morning in 1898. He had a satchel in hand, his diploma, and $100 in his pocket. He was ready to start his business, a career in the town of Bourne. As I mentioned, his name was Edward Drew Nickerson, better known as Ned Nickerson. He was not yet 19 years old, newly graduated from the United States School of Embalming in New York. He did indeed start his career, which was to continue for 50 years until his retirement, 52 years in fact his retirement. And he had for funeral homes here and down Cape eventually too. His nephew took care of the one down in Chatham, and other family members took care of of the others further down. His professor at that time, though, the head of the Bourne School, who had written the first textbooks for undertakers, said to him, I don't think you're going to stick to this line of work, as you're a little too full of mischief. Well, mischief was far from his mind, however, as he crossed the street from the station that first morning to engage a small third, fourth-story room for $6 a week, board included, at the one hotel in the village, the Parker House. He was not concerned by the lack of heat, as his mother had given him a B&H kerosene lantern, and it had a special globe on it that was supposed to radiate the heat from the light into the room, and it kept the room rather comfortable. So, as he sat there the next day, he was looking out and he noticed a building next door. He was anxious to get his next step going. And there was a building next door. It was a meat store. And he hired an L off the meat store to start his undertaker's office. By the end of that day, he had a sign out saying undertaker's office. It was the first one. He said undertaker. He was the first licensed undertaker in Obama on Cape Cod. Later, he became the first one in the area to establish a funeral home. He was the first one to have a motorized hearse. So he did a lot of firsts. And getting back to his vehicles that he had, he decided the first one he had belonged, the first, I forgot about it, his first funeral. The first year he did 7 funerals. And this is his bill for the very first one. Look at the cost. And he made a profit at this. And think what they charge today. The most expensive thing, of course, was the casket. The minister, $2. And a Surrey and a driver, $2. So it was very reasonable to die back then. You should have one today comparing and see. But then, of course, you have to compare salaries too and all. So,
Judy, what's a hat?
what is it, what?
A hat is one hat, a wagon.
It's what, like a wagon.
Yeah,
This hearse was the first one used in the area. This was, I think, it was about 1860. The town of Sandwich bought it. And they bought it for their western village over here at Manningham. And also Cohasset Narrows. And it was stored in, do you all know where the old Bourne Cemetery is? It's also called the Manningham North Cemetery. It's over off Stewart Street and County Road, right in that area. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from here. And that's where they stored this horse. This belonged to the town, but it was for this side and they would use it. So that's the first one. He used that, but he really thought that people needed a little bit more, fancy and things. So as he started doing better, he decided to hire a fancy one with 2 black horses. This 2 black horses, apparently that was very important. But this is the one that he did hire. And then he went from that. He became, as I mentioned, this is hard to see, but this is his very first motorized hearse, and the first one on Cape Cod. And what he said about it, my first motor hearse, body built by T. Fred Klug, a German mechanic, and a good one. He hand cut the pillars and did all of the work on the body by hand. It was mounted on a 1910 Cadillac chassis, as heavy as ever. So darn clumsy that I couldn't go above 12 miles an hour with it, 6 on hills. But I got along somehow. However, it was the first motor hearse on Cape Cod. Then as he was doing better, he upgraded. The first really decent motor hearse I ever owned. It's a Dodge 4-cylinder job, painted gray and black. I bought it new in Lewiston, Maine, at the cost of $1,200 in 1918, and used it for about 6 years. One of the funerals, he did, as I mentioned, the first year, 7 years. Oh, I forgot to tell you all the other things that, the funeral business, well, of course, at $58, the funeral really wasn't that good as far as survival. So he had to do all manner of other jobs. One of the hardest one he did was harvesting ice. And there are a lot of jobs in harvesting ice. And the hardest one, he decided to do the hardest one because that made the most money. And that was being a sawman, sawing the ice out and getting it ready. He also did all sorts of other things. He painted houses. He shoveled snow. He worked in the cranberry bog. And later he was a janitor at the town library in between funerals. And so he did a lot of work to get ready to build this business up. And as it built up, one of his most interesting funerals, he thought, was the funeral of a famous actor. Can you remember which the actor would be here in Bourne? Joseph Jefferson, right. Joseph Jefferson, it was the burial was to be in neighboring Sandwich, and Mr. Nixon had been asked to work with the funeral director there for the service. Joseph Jefferson had died in Palm Beach, Florida, and his body was shipped by special train to Boston and then to Buzzards Bay. So as he was coming to Crow's Nest, Nickerson picked him up out of the box and carried him in and put him on. He had a board on one of the tables in the library because he wanted him to be displayed properly for this. This time, remember, they didn't come into the funeral home. They went into your homes. Do any of you remember going to funerals in homes? Oh, of course, not the oldest part of it. My first funeral was my grandfather's, and it was in the parlor of my grandparents' house. And all the flowers were there, and the body, and everything. And so, this is what was happening at Crow's Nest. And then, so they had the funeral. It was supposed to be a very simple funeral, and private, but more and more people came. A whole train from New York full of people came. The governor of New York was there. Several people were there to show that. In fact, let me get the right place here to tell you about the funeral girl. I was going to be lunching that organizer. All right. There were 9 carriages full of just flowers, along with all the other guys. They had so many people coming, they had to scrounge from Wareham down to Provincetown to get extra carriages to come up and help them carry the people. And if you look at the line from Crow's Nest to the funeral home, it would be, when they arrived, the people arrived at, not the funeral home, the cemetery in Sandwich. When they arrived there would still be cars just coming out of Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest was over in Cohasset, it was over in Cohasset Narrows. It was his summer home.
Oh, okay.
Joseph Jefferson was an actor who played, he's well known for Rip Van Winkle. And he lived in this area, he had a summer home, he was friends with Bill Cleveland, and they fished in this area. So he was a very important person. He was well known in the whole country. The president. We have a scrapbook that someone had, I think it was his son, had developed when he died for things that people sent him. They were from presidents, people from all over the world, kings, queens, unbelievable things in this scrapbook of people who were affected by Joseph Jefferson. And as Nickerson said, this was his biggest funeral. So, he said we go on to see this. And at the end, after all the people left, he was ready to signal to the person that was helping him to come over and fill in, and another vehicle came in, another wagon, and it had 2 men in it. And they asked if they could have 5 minutes. And it was the former governor of New York, Frank Black, and the artist, John Singer Sargent. were coming to pay their respects. They were late, and of course, Nicholson did wait for them and wait until they left. In fact, you can see Nicholson in the background over there too. And then that's Joseph Jefferson's stone over inside. There is a story about Joseph Jefferson about being buried in Sandwich. It said, they mentioned that he wanted to buy in Sandwich, and the people, they didn't think an actor was at the right level to come into their village and all. So he bought Crow's Nest over here in Buzzards Bay. So he decided when he died, he was going to be buried in Sandwich, and he was. But that's one of those things that says legend is, so I'm not sure whether it's really true or not. But that's what the legend is. So that's why he's in Sandwich, because they wouldn't let him in when he was alive, so we went and released him. Now, Old Burial Cemetery, that's the one I was talking about. That's where, up and back is where they would have kept their hearse in between. And Old Burial, this cemetery started because there was a winter storm, and there was not, the only cemetery in Bourne was, I don't know if any, do you know what a Tuxedo trading post is? Okay. In that area, at that time before the post was there and it had gone, it became a cemetery. That's where they buried bodies, but they never marked them. There was a man, and I can't remember his name, in 1890, said he remembered them digging up and finding bones there, so he knows it was. So that was the place that they put them, but it wasn't a formal cemetery. And there was a storm, and the poorhouse in Falmouth had a man who died, and they're responsible to bury them, but he was from Bourne, which at that time was Sandwich. So they were bringing him along, kind of, we were going to Sandwich to bury him. And it was such a bad storm, they just couldn't go any further. So they went inside the road, on County Road, right here, and buried him. And then a few weeks later, another indigent died, so they just buried him there too. Well, the field belonged to Gershom Ellis, and he finally did give it to them for this purpose. So it did become the cemetery then. But they would have been the first two, those men would have been the first two that would have been buried, they would have been buried there. Oh, I guess I missed one. This is the burial place of the two strangers, and that's what it was called. And if you go there, there's a stone wall, and they believe that indigents were buried right under the stone wall. The stone wall wasn't there, the stone wall apparently was put there afterwards, but that's where they were. And there are also some men in there that are buried that there was a big ship from New York that went around and people died from along the coast here, and several of the men from that were buried in there too. So there are a lot of unknowns in there. Although I believe they did know the captain's name. I can't remember, but they did know his name and one of the mates they had the name of. The other crew members they didn't know who they were. And this is the oldest, this is the name. Remember our colors? This is the name. Can anyone pronounce that first name or give a guess for it? If the A was where the S was, it would be easier, but so whatever it is, we all agree that is an unusual name? Yes. Okay, first one I got. This person in that cemetery is the one who lived the longest. She lived 102 years. And George Briggs, the Briggs McDermott house over here, he's part of that. He has a picture. When you go into the refreshments up above, there's a picture of Briggs leaning up against the wall. And one of the interesting things that I did this one for is the anchor. We have different things that people put on these tombs, on their stones, and this one is an anchor. And people have, it's interesting, I was talking with my daughter around Christmas time. She bought me some beautiful earrings that weren't anchors. And one of her friends said to her, why would you buy anchors? You know, because she was thinking of anchors as holding you down. But my daughter, who would come from here and was used to being out on boats and things, to her the anchor was safety and security. So apparently, hopefully that's what George Briggs thought about it too. And this is the man who gave the land for the cemetery. He and his family are actually buried there too. He also built the Management House. It's an Management Apartments. It's a big, if you go just beyond the library on the corner, there's a big apartment building. He built that. He built Joya. By the way, she apologizes for not being able to see. Her stepmother had a knee operation and she had to go to Virginia to help her. She usually does this with me. But her house is on the corner on County Road. There's a house right there at the beginning of County Road. He built that house too. And he and his son built the Arabelle Parker house, which is when you go down County Road here, it's a red house. So there are a lot of houses around here that he built that is still surviving. So
what's a DEA stand for? DEA, what was that?
Deacon.
Deacon.
Okay. He's a deacon of the church. This is Moses Waterhouse. There's Waterhouse Road, that's what it's named for. And he was the first assessor, one of the first assessors in the town of Bourne. Not our favorite people to do it, but somebody has to do it. None of you are assessors, are you? Okay. But, and he, interestingly enough, he was also a carpenter, and he repaired the Management House. And he also worked on the Bruce McDermott house when they were fixing that up too. So he came along after and fixed up the things so they all were working on the same line. He also was in the school department, school committee. He was on the school committee. And at 42 years old, he went back to school and got his law degree. So he was a very interesting person. And it's right that the street named for him is right near the high school. And this is the South Monument Cemetery. On County Road there are two monument cemeteries because the old Bourne Cemetery was also called Monument Mill, the Mill Monument Cemetery. So this is the one that's further down the road. And this was much later. Charles Raleigh is buried there. You all know Charles Raleigh? Well, Charles Raleigh was an artist. This is a picture of President Grover Cleveland, home to us by the Bourne Historical Society, painted by Charles Raleigh. He's up here, painted by Charles Raleigh. And when you go in the other room, you'll see one in his, and we see Vesta Braley was his granddaughter. And she remembers the one in the other room, it's polar bears eating seals. And it was in the dining room, and she went there every Sunday for lunch, dinner, and she had to sit, and she faced it, it was up over the buffet, and she could never eat because she was just so upset about it. So it became hers, and she gave it to the archives, so she didn't have to look at it. So you make sure you look up. The boys in the neighborhood love that picture. So, but it is very interesting. Charles Raleigh was an interesting person in that he was a seaman at one point, coastal but he was never a whaler. But he lived in New Bedford, went down to the wharves, he talked to the captains, and he did a lot of his paintings of the whaling ships and all, and he has a very good eye for it. And he was a self-taught painter. In fact, a lot of the houses here have ceilings. If you go to the Prison McDermott house, the ceiling has painted, a ceiling painted. Okay, this was the first one buried there. Whoops. See, the B is not supposed to be in front of the D. When I was checking, I had them backwards. So I tried to fix the name. I didn't get the B off it, but he was born in July, died in August. Not the other way around. But he was the first one buried in that cemetery. And this is the unusual name for me. A what? Wilden. A Wilden? Oh, Wilden. What type of name is it?
I don't know. It was the name of my aunt.
I see, I knew I'd find something like that. So it's not funny to you. It's not different to you.
No, it's not.
Okay. But I just thought it seemed very, a lot of them, when you see their last name, you see the name Y, it's quite different, so I didn't pick those. I wasn't sure what this was. But I thought a girl wouldn't mind being called Y, and she really did, have fun. Carol Jennings would be the one that would have lived the longest, and I could not find her stone. He had taken some pictures, and I thought when I was doing this, well, I can just go and take another one. You can't even find the cemetery for this one that were the stones, so you just have to have the words. But in this one, she would have been the one that lived the longest. And the Potomac Cemetery has some interesting people in it. And this is the name here. And what's over there? Which is odd. Going through the cemetery, it is very interesting to find the different names. And some of them, I work in Plymouth also and do the genealogy there. So some of the names are the older names, so they don't seem so strange because I work with them. But some of these I have never seen. But the first burials in there were in 1777, and it was two people, and they died within a few days of each other. And they were related, so you assume it's probably some disease, and the diseases go through. Quite often you can see in the cemetery, and certain people, and the oldest one, there were two. No, one but two, 103 in the Potomac Cemetery.
Can I take a picture of that?
Mm-hmm.
Our friends over the morning. She loved that. Mother Curry, family room in Mayflower.
Oh, which one?
I think it was. But you would like this. Okay, if you don't mind.
Pocasset Cemetery. This is County Road entrance. Pocasset Cemetery has two sections. Going in from County Road is the older section. If you go in from Bowles Landing Road further up, it's on the other side is a much newer section. So right now we're just working on the older section. We will get to the years old. There are a lot of vowels in the cemetery. Actually, there are a lot of vowels in the Potomac Cemetery, too. I was trying to count the different Barlows, Ellis's, Finney's.
With the Barlows, the initial founders of I guess Chatham, which became Bourne. It's about sandwich. Sandwich.
They would, yes, it would be. It's all. Would you all be? Diane. Oops, what am I? And he is the oldest one. 98. And this is would be the daughter of Captain Jesse Bauer, and see if that excuse me. All right, some of you, I don't know how many of you are from this side. Good, right? I know him because he was a policeman. But now we have a whole department of natural resources. He was the one that got you, and he knew every time you got, no matter where he was. The time that you picked up the wrong co-op, wrong size, he was right there. He was, you know how they have these, people have this boogeyman that they say people after, well, birthright was the one. My cousin was 2 years old and he was on the beach, and my uncle was sitting up on his blanket reading a book, and he was just picking up shells and things, and one of the shells had a cohort in it. And my uncle was arrested and had to go to court and pay a $25 fine because his son had put a cohort in the basket in the pail.
I remember that man too.
Yeah.
I remember that light.
So there are people that we all remember for different reasons who did a very good job, unless you were the one getting caught. This is the Monument Next Cemetery. This has some very interesting people in it. One of the people that I find the most interesting in here is, let's see on it. I'm not sure I get the right names on it. His name Captain Baldridge, George Baldridge. He started out as a young boy. When he was a young boy, he stowed away on Captain Burgess's ship. And when they were 2 days out from a foreign port, they realized he was stowed away. So Captain Burgess, instead of whatever they do with stowaways, ended up taking him and training him and teaching him the ways of whaling. He ended up becoming a captain. Captain Burgess's wife was called Aunt Anne to all the sailors, and she sort of took him in and took care of him. He did learn, he sailed with him on several voyages after that. He became a famous whaling captain, and by the time he was one of the first ones to use motorized whaling ships from the west coast. By the time that he got to be a captain, from coming out of New Bedford and all, it was they were doing it more from the west coast. And when their voyages would be less than a year, it would be a few months, because they had motorized vehicles. It wasn't like the 2 to 4 years that the other sailing captains had to go. So he sailed up into the Arctic. He was one of the ones when they got trapped up there. But before his voyage before that, when he went up, he brought a photographer on the ship with him and allowed him to take pictures. And there is out there somewhere, and we're hoping someone knows and can tell us where there's a copy that we can find. You know the stereoptic cards that they made? There's a whole set made of the whaling from the time they see this whale, the ship, the small boats going out for him, until they try the whale right down. And it's a great set. And when he came home, he had a set and he used to show it to people, but nobody has seen them in recent years. And we're working on a whaling book, and that would be perfect to get to. So if anyone has in their attic, they find old things there. If they find those stereoptics, Joy would like very much to copy them. So, but that was, he has a house that is on Shore Road, and it's a very interesting home. The person that, do you want to know what the mattress is? It's a capital, it's a big capital. And the man that owns the capital, the mattress now, lives in Captain Baldwin's house. It's almost across from Gary Gables Market. And it's a house that is really great. and he has a lot of interesting things there about him. But there is Captain Baldwin's, and what it says on the bottom is, hero of the deep, sleep on in peace, too long untossed by the driven foam, but now proud home, I'm going home. There are very interesting comments on many of the stones too. And this would be the first one that was buried in that cemetery. And I thought this was an interesting book to me. And there's another one right here with Sophia, and it seems as though they must be sisters because they're very similar stones. Okay, can you guess who that is? And I wouldn't have guessed if I hadn't taken it out of the folder.
The cemetery across from your exit.
Right? Very good. That's what it is. It's the Oakland Grove. Let's see. And this Cornelia Baker, she's on here for two things. One of the things is she's the oldest one in the cemetery, 102. And also, she was the postmistress in Buzzards Bay Cemetery for about 14 years. And she just was also, in her life, I wrote down here so I could remember properly because I'm not going to say it right. Towards the end of her life, a very long life, she remembered, Cornelia remembered the good, lovely, simple days of her time in Bourne. So she longed for the old art times. And this is Adele Swift. He was the clerk for years and the treasurer in the town. And his daughter took over the position for 7 years after he finished with that. What's her name? Do you remember?
First one. The oldest and the first person ever.
Yes. Now I go to Samuel Cemetery. All right, this one, this is Ben Abbey. Do you know what Ben Abbey Road is? Oh, might be. In Sagamore. It's right beside the cemetery.
That's right, it is.
So you wonder if that might have been his land. And actually, the next thing I was going to talk about on here, in Elizabeth Gibbs, we have the first one. And they have Minnesota, and Jerry Ellis was going to be here, and he's the keeper of it, and he was going to sort of tell you, but I can tell you a few of them, not as well as he can tell you. But as you go into the cemetery from Ben Abbey Road, and you go in that way, there's a big overflowing tree. It's really beautiful tree. And you go in there around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can smell pipe smoke. And it's Isaac Keith. And he has, over further, they have a tomb that they have, a vault that the family has. But he's usually there at that time, but he has scared quite a few people. In fact, Jerry said the first time he encountered him, he couldn't get home fast enough, and he wasn't sure he wanted to go back. But now he just says, "Hi, Isaac," and keeps going, and so it's fine. But the Sagamore Cemetery, some of the graves there, I think 33, I think it was 33, are actually from graves that were by the Collins Farm. And if you know, this year all the thing we're talking about that picture over there, that's the car, when they were moving the house there in the canal. That was where the canal was, where the canal is now. Well, there was a cemetery there, and they had to move them. And a lot of the men from Keith Cowworks helped them dig their bodies up. And they would take, most of them could not read English, so they really weren't sure. So the one person wrote what they saw with chalk on top of them, which is fine, it might have worked, except between the time they put them in there and moved them, it rained. So, according to Isaac Keith, the reason why they're very upset is some of them are in the wrong graves. They're under the wrong name. They all would have come from the same place, but they're just not under their own name. They can believe that or not. But he also has a little girl there. She died in the 1930s of one of the diseases that was going on. And she's very playful. He said, if you could walk around two of them standing, and they can feel, and someone will be like brushing between them, and they can hear her breathing. As I say, you can believe these things or not, but it's supposed to be the most haunted cemetery on the Cape. So if you're brave enough to go by at night, or even at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and see if you can smell that pipe smoke, maybe you know it's going to happen. And then, as I said, we have a lot more to learn about the cemeteries and their residents. If there's anything you can add, call us, come and visit us. And thank you for supporting our CPA projects in the archives.